"Mom, drink this glass of milk before the meeting. I made it exactly the way you like." That was the sentence my daughter-in-law said to me on the morning I almost died. I am telling you this plainly, without suspense or decoration, because I don't want you distracted by style. I want you focused on the truth. At 66 years old, after decades of running a company, burying a husband, and raising a son on my own, I learned something brutal. The greatest danger rarely comes from strangers. It comes from the people who know your habits, your weaknesses, and the exact way you like your milk warmed. My name is Elaine Johnson. I am a Black woman, a widow, and the founder of Whitestone Logistics, a company I built with my late husband and rebuilt alone after his heart gave out at 49. For 30 years, that company fed families, paid mortgages, and carried our family name with dignity. On the morning this story begins, I was preparing to hand it over to my son, Darren. That was my mistake. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. The board, the lawyers, the accountants, everyone would be there. It was meant to be a clean transition, a proud moment, a mother stepping aside so her son could step forward. I woke up before dawn, as I always did, my joints stiff, my mind already running through numbers and names. Rosa had already been up for hours. She always was. Rosa Martinez had worked in my house for 22 years. She watched Darren grow from a stubborn boy into a man I barely recognized. She watched me grieve my husband and then stand back up when the world expected me to shrink. She never missed a day unless she was sick, and even then, she called to check on me. Before she came to work for us, she trained as a licensed practical nurse. She noticed things most people overlooked. Celia noticed that too. And she didn't like it. Celia is my son's wife. Beautiful, educated, polished. The kind of woman people describe as a catch. She moved through my home like she belonged there, learned my routines quickly, memorized my preferences, too quickly if I'm being honest. But at the time, I told myself I was lucky. A mother is expected to be grateful when her son marries well. That morning, Celia came into the sitting room holding a ceramic mug. My mug. The one with the thin handle I preferred because it didn't burn my fingers. Steam rose gently from the surface. "Mom, drink this glass of milk before the meeting. I made it exactly the way you like." She smiled as she said it. Not wide, controlled, loving in a way that looked perfect from a distance. I reached for it. And that's when Rosa struck my arm. Not hard, not violently, just enough to knock the mug forward. Milk splashed onto the table, onto my skirt, onto the rug James picked out 30 years ago. "Oh my God, Rosa!" Celia exploded, her face contorting into something I'd never seen before. "What the hell is wrong with you, you stupid idiot?" she shrieked, stepping forward, slapping Rosa across the face with a loud crack. I froze. Rosa recoiled, clutching her cheek, stunned into silence. "Celia," I gasped, stepping between them. "Stop! That's enough!" But before I could say another word, Celia turned on me. Her arm swung wide and hard not to strike, but to push me aside. "Stay out of this," she snapped, her voice raw and unrecognizable. Her hand struck my shoulder, and I stumbled. My hip caught the sharp edge of the table. Pain burst down my side, and I fell awkwardly, humiliatingly onto the floor. My breath left me in a stunned gasp. "Are you serious?" Celia spat, looming over me. "You're going to defend her? After she ruins your morning and spills everything like a damn child?" Rosa dropped to her knees beside me, tears already streaming down her face. "Please, Mrs. Johnson, I'm sorry," she cried. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, please forgive me." She wasn't begging for herself. She was begging for me. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just an accident. Rosa wasn't just afraid of losing her job. She was afraid I was going to die. I didn't say a word then. I couldn't. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. Pain throbbed down my side. Celia was still breathing hard, eyes wild, her polished mask cracked wide open. I changed my clothes in silence. Rosa followed me upstairs with a fresh blouse. When the door closed behind us, she didn't apologize again. She didn't explain. She simply leaned in and whispered, "Please, don't drink anything she gives you. Not today." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scold her gently and tell her she was overthinking things. Instead, I felt a cold settle in my stomach. Because for months, I had been tired, dizzy, forgetful. I blamed age, stress, grief that never fully leaves a woman. I had doctors tell me it was normal. I had a son and a daughter-in-law tell me I needed to rest more, to let go. Rosa handed me my blouse and stepped back, as if she had already said too much. When I went back downstairs, another mug sat on the counter. Identical. The same milk, the same cinnamon scent. Celia was already in the boardroom with Darren. I stared at that mug for a long time. Then I picked it up and carried it with me. The boardroom was quiet, respectful. Darren sat beside me, confident, eager. He adjusted his tie the way he used to straighten his backpack straps before school. I placed the mug in front of him casually. "You left this behind," I said. He smiled at me. "Thanks, Mom." He drank it. I watched Celia's face when he did. Just for a second, just a flicker, her expression shifted. Something tight, something alert. Then it vanished. The meeting started. Papers were signed. Words were spoken. Darren stood to thank me for my years of leadership. Halfway through his speech, his voice wavered. His hand began to shake. He sat down abruptly, pale, sweating. Someone asked if he was all right. Rosa was already at his side. An ambulance came, then a hospital room, then a doctor explaining toxic buildup. Not enough to kill him, not yet, but enough to make one thing clear. What he drank wasn't meant for him. I sat in that sterile room listening to machines hum and realized the truth I had been avoiding. Someone in my family had decided I was worth more dead than alive, and the only reason I was still breathing was because a woman everyone called just the help chose to spill a little milk. If you felt for Elaine, hit like and tell us where you're watching from. You might just find someone near you who's watching too. The beeping machines in Darren's hospital room carried a rhythm I couldn't ignore. Each mechanical chirp echoed the same thought over and over again in my mind. That glass of milk was never meant for him. He lay in the bed with an IV in his arm, his usually sharp features slack, lips pale, sweat glistening along his brow. Celia sat beside him, carefully dabbing his forehead with a damp cloth, her mouth turned down just enough to show concern, her touch tender, patient, perfect. Again. Rosa stood a few feet behind me, hands clenched at her sides, her eyes never leaving Celia. No one spoke to me. Not yet. The doctor had confirmed it twice. Traces of toxic compounds, plant-based, likely introduced slowly over time. He asked if Darren had been on any new medications, supplements, changes in diet. Celia had quickly listed a few natural things she'd introduced to their morning routine. Almond milk, turmeric shots, herbal powders, all seemingly harmless, all supposedly organic. When he asked if Darren had any enemies, she laughed, touched his hand and said, "Of course not. He's a sweetheart." I had to grip the edge of the chair beside me to keep my hands from shaking, because I knew better. I watched her lie so smoothly I could barely believe it, but what chilled me more than her words was Darren's silence. He wasn't unconscious, just still, like a man too tired to face whatever was coming next. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look at me. Did he know? Back home, the silence in the house rang louder than the beeping hospital monitors. I climbed the stairs slowly, my hips still sore from the fall, and went straight to the study. Rosa followed, closing the door behind us. "You didn't drink it," she said. I turned. "No," she exhaled shakily. "Thank God." My hands trembled as I poured myself a glass of water. My throat still felt like it was closing in. "Tell me what you know," I said. "I don't know anything for sure," she said quickly. "But I've been watching. For months." I nodded slowly. "Go on." She always insists on bringing your drinks. Always. At first I thought she was just trying to be helpful, but then I noticed she never lets anyone else prepare them. Not me, not the kitchen staff. That was true. I had chalked it up to pride or the kind of performative helpfulness common in wives trying to impress. But now, I realized she had made herself the sole gatekeeper of what entered my body. "She changes the containers," Rosa continued. "I've seen her take milk out of the fridge, dump it, and use another bottle she keeps in the downstairs bar fridge. It's unlabeled." That detail made my stomach twist. I had noticed the bar fridge being used more often, but again dismissed it. Why wouldn't I? My own home had become a stage I thought I still directed, when in truth, I'd been watching someone else pull the strings. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. Not accusingly, but with deep, aching exhaustion. Rosa's voice cracked. Because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me, that she'd twist it, that she'd say I was trying to turn you against your family. I sat heavily into the leather armchair beside the fireplace. I might have. I know, she said softly. But when I saw her hand you that milk today, something in me screamed. There was silence between us. Heavy, honest. She struck you, I finally said. She hit you. Rosa shook her head. It doesn't matter. Yes, it does. That wasn't just anger. That was panic. She didn't expect you to act. She lost control. The realization sank deeper with each breath. She hit me too. I touched my shoulder where the bruise was beginning to blossom. That wasn't panic. That was rage. She thought I was going to ruin something, Rosa said. She thought it was her only chance. I looked up. And Darren? Rosa hesitated. I don't know. Neither did I. But it haunted me, the possibility that my son knew something. That maybe he didn't, but didn't want to know. That maybe he had turned a blind eye because loving someone sometimes means pretending you don't see the fire when it's still smoke. Or maybe he was part of it. That thought clawed at something inside me. When James died, Darren was 16. He had watched me put on a black dress and become a steel pillar overnight. He saw me run meetings while holding back tears, smile at investors while grieving alone at night. I had told myself I was doing it for him, for our future, that one day all of it would be his. Had I built a dynasty for a man who didn't care if I lived long enough to hand it over? That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed in the study long after Rosa went to bed. I sat surrounded by ledgers, photos, and awards evidence of a life I had fought for, and I thought about how I would never see it the same way again. I didn't feel fear. Not exactly. I felt betrayed, hollowed. Like someone had hollowed out the center of everything I believed in and left only a shell. I needed proof, and I needed a plan. I wouldn't confront Celia, not yet. I needed more than suspicion and Rosa's testimony. I needed evidence no one could argue with. I pulled out an old company laptop, one I kept for private board matters, and began combing through security footage logs. Our home had cameras mostly external, some in hallways, and one tucked discreetly near the kitchen for insurance reasons. I found the timestamp from that morning. In the footage, I watched Celia go to the fridge at 6:48 a.m. She pulled out 2 bottles, one labeled, one not. She poured something into a pot, added cinnamon, stirred. Then she reached under the sink, where we kept cleaning supplies, and took out a small, dark vial. My breath caught. She poured just a few drops into the milk, stirred again, and poured it into my mug. There it was, clear as glass. I saved the footage, twice. Once to a USB, and once to a locked external drive. Then I leaned back, hands pressed together, and whispered aloud to the room, "You tried to kill the wrong woman. Because I may be 66, but I am still here. And I am still their mother." The next morning, I woke before sunrise with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Not peace clarity. There is a difference. Peace soothes, clarity sharpens. And that morning, my mind felt like a blade. Darren was still in the hospital. The doctors said he would recover fully, though they couldn't explain how a healthy man in his 40s had accumulated that level of toxin in his system. They asked about supplements again. Diet, stress, genetics. They circled the truth like men afraid to say the word murder out loud. Celia stayed with him overnight. I didn't object. Not because I trusted her, but because I needed her exactly where she was. Close, comfortable, unafraid. Predators make mistakes when they think the threat has passed. I asked Rosa to prepare my breakfast. Not Celia. Not anyone else. As Rosa poured my coffee black, no sugar, no milk, her hands shook slightly. "Are you sure, Mrs. Johnson?" she asked quietly. "I'm sure," I said, "and I need you calm." She nodded, straightening her shoulders the way she used to when she worked double shifts at the clinic. "Tell me what to do." I met her eyes. "You already did the hardest part. Now we wait and we watch." By 9 o'clock, Celia returned home. She moved through the house like nothing had happened, took off her coat, placed her purse on the console table. She didn't look at me right away. That told me everything. She was afraid of my eyes. "How's Darren?" I asked evenly. She flinched, just a fraction. "He's better. Exhausted. The doctors think it was some kind of reaction. Stress, maybe." Stress, I repeated. She nodded quickly. Yes, you know how much pressure he's been under. The transition, the company. She trailed off, watching me carefully. I smiled. I do, I said. Which is why the transition is postponed. Her face froze. For how long? She asked. Too fast. For as long as it takes, I replied. Until we're sure he's healthy. Until I'm sure. She swallowed. The board won't like that. I am the board, I said calmly. There it was again, that flicker of something ugly behind her eyes. Entitlement, rage, calculation. She turned away before it could show. I'll let Darren know, she said, her voice tight. After she left the room, I went back to the study and locked the door. I pulled out the USB drive and inserted it into my laptop. I watched the footage again, this time with sound. At first, there was nothing but the hum of the refrigerator. Then Celia's voice, low and irritated, on the phone. I know. Just trust me, she said. She drinks it every morning. She won't notice. I felt something inside me go very still. She's not as sharp as she used to be, Celia continued. That's the whole point. A little at a time. No one questions a woman her age. A pause. No, Rosa's nothing. She's just the help. I closed my eyes. I had been reduced to a liability, a timeline, a problem to solve quietly. I copied the file again, this time to cloud storage with a password only I knew. Then I called my attorney. Marcus Bell had represented me for over 20 years. He had watched me bury my husband, renegotiate contracts, fire executives twice my size without blinking. When I told him I needed to see him immediately, he didn't ask why. An hour later, he sat across from me in the study, hands folded, eyes sharp. Elaine, he said gently, tell me everything. I did. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he leaned back and exhaled slowly. You understand what this means? Yes, I said. It means my daughter-in-law tried to kill me, and possibly used your son as a shield, he added. That, I said, is what I need to know. Marcus nodded. Then we proceed carefully. No accusations, no confrontations. We document, we protect you, and we protect Rosa. At the sound of her name, my chest tightened. She hit her, I said quietly. And me. His jaw hardened. That matters. I want to make something very clear, I said. I will not let this turn into a story where a powerful family throws a working woman under the bus. Rosa saved my life. And you'll testify to that, he said firmly. That afternoon, I made 3 decisions. First, I had the kitchen professionally cleaned, not as a courtesy, but as evidence control. Nothing removed, everything cataloged. Second, I ordered blood work for myself. Quietly. No Celia, no Darren. Third, I told Rosa to take the rest of the week off with pay and stay with her sister across town. She resisted. I don't want to leave you alone. I took her hands. You didn't protect me so I could lose you now. Please. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'll be ready when you need me. I watched her leave and felt something I hadn't expected. Gratitude. That night, my phone rang. It was Darren. Mom, he said, his voice weak but familiar. Celia told me about the delay. Yes, I said. How are you feeling? Confused, he admitted. They say it was toxins, but no one can tell me where they came from. I took a breath. Darren, has Celia been preparing your meals lately? There was a pause. Yeah, he said slowly. She's been really into health stuff, supplements, detoxes. Why? Because, I said carefully, the milk you drank yesterday wasn't meant for you. Silence. Then, very quietly, what are you saying? I'm saying I think someone has been poisoning me, and I think you drank my share. Another long pause. You think Celia would do that? He asked, incredulous. Hurt. I think someone did, I replied, and I have proof. His breathing changed. I could hear it. Mom? If you're wrong, I am not, I said. I heard something break on the other end of the line. Not glass, not anger. Denial. I need time, he whispered. You don't have much, I said gently. Neither did I. When the call ended, I sat alone in the dark, listening to the house breathe. I thought about the woman I had been 6 months ago, tired, trusting, eager to step aside. I thought about how easily I had almost disappeared. Justice is not loud at first. It starts quietly, with records, with witnesses, with women who refuse to stay silent, and I was just getting started. 3 days passed. Celia didn't ask about the postponed transition again. She played the role of the dutiful wife with chilling perfection, taking Darren's calls, attending to his meals, and even offering to handle my schedule so I could rest. She moved through the house like an actress who had memorized every line, never missing a cue. But I no longer believed the performance. Every time I heard her voice echo down the hallway, every time her heels clicked across the marble floor, I thought of that phone call, the one she made in my kitchen. She won't notice. No one questions a woman her age. The words had lodged in my bones. And still, I said nothing. Because when a woman like me speaks too soon, she becomes emotional, overreacting. I've spent too many years learning how to bide my time. Instead, I watched. I listened. I waited. And the house watched with me. Whitestone Manor, as the press once called it, isn't some grand estate with spiral staircases and chandeliers. It's a spacious colonial outside of Raleigh, modest in comparison to the wealth I've quietly built, but it's mine. Every floorboard, every wall, every squeaky cabinet hinge. It remembers the sound of James humming through paperwork at 2 a.m. It remembers Darren's first steps. It remembers silence after loss. And now, it remembers betrayal. The old security system James installed after a break-in decades ago still worked partially, but I'd upgraded it 5 years ago when Rosa was attacked in the driveway by a dog while bringing in groceries. Cameras inside and out, some visible, some discreet. Celia didn't know about the one in the second-floor hallway, hidden in the air vent near the office door. That's where I caught her. It was late, past midnight. I had pretended to go to bed early, left the lights off in my room, and kept the study door cracked open an inch. I watched from my chair as Celia tiptoed down the hallway. She wasn't checking on me. She walked past my room and into the office. I waited. 10 minutes later, she slipped back out, holding a manila folder against her chest. The next morning, that folder was missing from my desk, but I had already scanned its contents. It contained insurance policies, life insurance, specifically updated only last year. The beneficiary, Darren. Primary and sole. The policy was significant, 7 figures. Celia had never once asked about my will, but she knew that document existed, and if I had passed before the board vote, she would have controlled everything through him. It wasn't just about the company. It was about what I was worth dead. That day, I visited Rosa. Her sister lived on the east side of town, in a small, sun-warmed house that smelled of lemon and mint. Rosa answered the door with a softness I hadn't seen in days. "Mrs. Johnson," she breathed. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, stepping in, "but it's going to be." We sat at her sister's kitchen table, the light pouring in from the window above the sink, and I laid out everything, the footage, the phone call, the stolen folder. Rosa didn't flinch. "She's getting bolder. Which means she's getting desperate," I said, "and we're going to use that." We spent the next hour creating a plan. First, we were going to plant bait. Second, we were going to watch her take it. Third, we were going to let her hang herself with her own hands. Back home that evening, I returned the folder to its place on the desk, but not before adding something new inside it. A fake legal document. A letter from my attorney stating I was considering reinstating a former board member, someone known to oppose Darren's leadership. It was a lie, of course. Marcus had helped me write it. But it was bait, and it worked. That night, the camera in the hallway caught Celia again. This time, she didn't sneak. She walked straight to the office and opened the folder, scanned the letter, and took a photo with her phone. Within an hour, Darren called me. "Mom," he said, "Celia told me you're planning to undermine the transition." I didn't respond right away. "She said you're reinstating David Klein, that he's going to fight my appointment." "I never said that," I replied calmly. "Why would Celia think I did?" "She found a letter," he said, "in your office." There it was. "How would she know where to look?" I asked softly. Darren paused. I don't know. Maybe she overheard you talking." I didn't speak, because I knew what he was really saying. Maybe she was looking for something. "Darren," I said after a beat, "if Celia were doing something behind my back, something dangerous, Would you want to know? His breath caught. Is she? I'm asking if you'd want to know. He was silent. Then he whispered, I don't know. That's when I understood. Darren didn't want to know. Because knowing meant choosing. And sons, even grown ones, struggle to choose between the woman who gave them life and the one they share a bed with. So I would choose for him. The next morning, I called a family meeting. Just the three of us. I said I wanted to talk about the transition plan, about timelines, about changes in leadership. Celia showed up in a cream-colored blouse and pearls, the image of composure. Darren sat beside her, his face guarded. I waited until Rosa entered with the tea tray, then asked her to stay. Celia blinked. Why is she here? She's part of this family too, I replied. More than some. I handed each of them a sealed envelope. Inside, a still frame from the kitchen camera. Celia, the vial, the milk. Darren looked at the photo, then at me. What is this? He asked. I turned to Celia. You tell him. She stood abruptly. This is insane. You're accusing me of poisoning you? I'm not accusing, I said, my voice like ice. I'm showing. She laughed. It was sharp, cracked. You're hallucinating. You're old, Elaine. You've been slipping for months. That's why Darren is taking over. Because you can't handle things anymore. Her voice rose. Her hands shook. You were going to give it all to her, she spat, pointing at Rosa. You think I don't know? You never respected me. You never wanted me here. Rosa flinched but didn't look away. Darren's face had gone white. Celia, he whispered, is it true? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was everything. Celia didn't speak. Not a word, not an apology, not even a denial. Just that silence, the kind that thickens a room like smoke, chokes the air before the fire comes. Darren stared at her, the photo trembling in his hand. His eyes, those same eyes that used to search for mine in school crowds, searched her face now, desperate for something that resembled the truth. But it wasn't there. She stood frozen, caught not by accident, but by design. I leaned forward slowly, voice even. I could have gone to the police. She flinched. I could have brought in the board, the press. I could have walked into that hospital and told them the whole story. But I didn't. Do you know why? Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Still silent. Because Darren deserved to hear it from me. Not from a detective, not from a headline, from his mother. Finally, she snapped. This is all some sick trap, she hissed. You want to humiliate me in front of him. You always hated me because I didn't come from your little circle of churchwomen and charity luncheons. This has nothing to do with your background, I said calmly. This has everything to do with the fact that you tried to murder me. You can't prove it, she spat. I have the footage, the audio, the toxins in Darren's blood. I held her gaze. How long were you slipping it into my drink, Celia? Weeks? Months? She didn't answer. So I stood. You were counting on my silence, I said. You were counting on age, on exhaustion, on the way people start ignoring older women in their own homes. But you forgot one thing. I pointed to Rosa. She was watching. Rosa lowered her eyes, not in shame, but humility. Celia's face twisted. She's lying. You're both lying. But she didn't yell at Rosa. She turned on Darren. You're really going to believe them over me? Your wife? The mother of your future children? Everything we've built together? What exactly have we built? He said, voice hoarse. Celia blinked. Because I don't recognize any of it anymore, he continued. All I see is poison, deceit. Secrets I didn't want to admit were sitting right across the dinner table. She stepped toward him. Baby, he pulled away. That, I think, hurt her more than any evidence. I need you to leave, Darren said quietly. It was barely a whisper, but it cracked the floor beneath her. What? Pack your things, he said. You can stay at the condo downtown. We'll figure out the rest later. She looked at me, then at Rosa, then back to him. No, she whispered. You don't mean this. You're just upset. She's manipulating you. I almost died, he said. From milk. From my mother's milk. And I drank it because you handed it to her. He looked her in the eyes, and I saw it happen, his world breaking in two. I don't know who you are anymore, he said. She stood there a long moment, her hands clenched at her sides, but there was no more fire in her voice, no more performance. Just the bitter realization that the stage had collapsed. She left without another word. The moment the door closed, Darren sank into the nearest chair like a man whose spine had finally cracked under the weight of disbelief. Rosa moved toward him instinctively, but I held her back with a look. This wasn't our moment to fix. "Mom," he said after a long silence. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I sat across from him. "Because I wasn't sure what you'd do with the truth." He looked down at his hands. "I'm not sure I was either." Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "Do you think she married me just for the money?" The question pierced something old and tender in me, because I had asked myself the same about James, once when we were young and poor and the future was uncertain. But he had proved it in sweat and sacrifice, in loyalty. Celia had proved the opposite. "I think," I said gently, "that you were a stepping stone to her idea of a throne." He nodded slowly. Then he broke. The tears came suddenly, fiercely, not loud, just steady. The grief of betrayal is different from the grief of loss. It's messier. It whispers, "You were never loved the way you thought." Rosa stepped forward with a box of tissues. Darren took it without looking at her. "I didn't see it," he said. "Any of it. I thought she was trying to help you. I thought she was loyal." "You saw what she wanted you to see," I said. "But deep down, Darren, you knew. You just didn't want to." He wiped his face and looked at me, eyes red. "What now?" "Now." That word carried weight, like the final page of a long, twisted chapter. "Now we rebuild," I said, slowly, carefully, without her. "But the company can wait," I said, "and it will." Darren nodded. "And Rosa?" I looked over at the woman who had saved my life with a spilled cup of milk. "She stays," I said. He stood slowly, walked over to her, and said something I didn't expect. "Thank you," he said, "for not giving up on her." Rosa nodded, her voice caught. "I just did what was right. Sometimes that's all it takes." That night, I walked into the study alone, sat by the fireplace. I didn't open any ledgers. I didn't answer any emails. I sat with my grief, with my relief, with the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. But in my bones, I knew better. Because evil doesn't leave quietly. It waits. And Celia wasn't finished. Celia left the house, but not the story. Darren tried to move on as if her absence meant resolution, as if betrayal could be boxed up with her jewelry and escorted out in a black SUV. But a woman like Celia doesn't just vanish. She lingers, like smoke in drapes, like poison in blood. The morning after she left, I walked through the house slowly, quietly. Every corner of my home bore some fingerprint of her presence. A folded throw blanket on the couch, a lipstick-stained mug in the sink. Her perfume still clung faintly to the hallway, the crisp scent of something expensive and calculated. Rosa was back, but moved differently now, watchful, cautious. She cleaned with intensity, her hands scrubbing as if to erase not just dirt but memory, and I understood. We were women of habit, women who had both learned that survival lives in the details. By noon, Darren hadn't come down. I gave him space. I knew the weight of what he was carrying. To find out your wife had tried to kill your mother and might have killed you by accident was a wound no one could dress. Around 1 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Rosa answered, then turned toward me, eyes wide. "It's for you." A young courier stood at the door with a clipboard and a neutral face. "Delivery for Mrs. Johnson." I took the padded envelope with my name printed neatly in block letters. No return address. Inside, a single USB drive. No note, no explanation. My pulse kicked into a slow gallop. I took it to the study, locked the door, and slid the drive into my laptop. One video file. It opened with static, then cleared. Celia. She sat in what looked like a hotel room, hair pulled back, face bare, different from the polished woman I knew. This was the version beneath the mask. "You probably think this is a confession," she began. "It's not. I didn't move. I know what you're doing. I know you have cameras. You always struck me as the paranoid type. But here's what you didn't think about. Who's going to believe you?" She leaned forward, eyes glittering. "You're a woman in her 60s. Your memory's slipping. You've been tired, forgetful. You've said so yourself. It's all documented. And I'm young. I'm beautiful. I'm grieving my husband's betrayal. Public opinion doesn't care about the truth. It cares about the narrative." I felt bile rise in my throat. And Rosa, she sneered. She's a maid. An immigrant. You think anyone's going to believe her over me? Over us? She smiled then. Slow, cold. You wanted to destroy me quietly, but I don't go quietly, Elaine. I don't disappear. The video ended. I stared at the screen, hand trembling slightly over the mouse. She was right about one thing: public opinion was a battlefield. And in a world where women like her knew how to cry at the right time and smile at the right camera, truth didn't always win. I called Marcus immediately. He arrived an hour later, suit slightly wrinkled, concern etched across his brow. She's already playing her next move, I said, showing him the footage. He watched silently, then replayed the last 10 seconds. She's daring us to go public, he murmured, trying to rattle you, paint you as vengeful. And she's prepping a defense. If this gets out, she'll say it's doctored, taken out of context. She'll spin it. I nodded. Then we need to get ahead of her. He looked at me. What do you want to do, Elaine? I stood, voice steady. I want to win. Over the next 48 hours, we worked in silence. No press releases, no legal threats, just preparation. Marcus filed for an emergency protective order, citing evidence of attempted poisoning and psychological harassment. He kept it sealed for now. Rosa and I combed through every drawer, every cabinet, every digital trace Celia might have left behind. We found more than I expected. Copies of company financials, lists of board members' personal addresses, a burner phone tucked behind a false panel in the guest bathroom. One of the texts chilled me. She's weak now. One final push. You ready? No name, no number attached, but the date was 2 weeks before the milk incident. I printed it, filed it, added it to the chain, and still, we said nothing. Because truth isn't always loud. Sometimes it waits, builds, tightens. Then, on Sunday morning, Darren came into the kitchen holding his phone like it had just bitten him. She posted something, he said. I took the phone. It was a public video. Celia, tears in her eyes, makeup perfectly smudged, sat on a couch with a soft throw around her shoulders. I never thought I'd be here, she began, voice cracking. But after everything I've endured in that house, I have to speak. I loved my husband. I adored his mother. I tried to care for her, but she became paranoid, controlling. She accused me of horrible things without evidence, without cause, and now I'm scared for my safety. A beat. She has this woman, her maid, who's always in the background, always watching me. I don't feel safe. I don't feel protected. So I'm stepping forward, not just for myself, but for other women who've been gaslit by people in power. Rosa gasped behind me. The video had already gone viral. Comments flooded in. Sympathy, rage, accusations, support. She's playing the victim, Darren said, and people are buying it. I looked at him. Are you? His jaw clenched. No, but I saw the pain in his eyes. Because despite it all, a part of him still grieved the version of Celia he once loved. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the study, fingers folded under my chin, staring at the screen, watching her face, replaying her words. And I knew then that the court of public opinion would not save me. It would have to be something bigger, something undeniable. The kind of truth you don't tell. The kind of truth you show. There are two kinds of war, the one you fight in the open and the one you fight in the silence between words. Celia had chosen the former. She wanted headlines, hashtags, the firestorm of social media sympathy. But I had lived long enough to know where real power lies in the places people don't think to look. And I was done watching. That Monday morning, I made 3 phone calls. First, to Marcus. I told him we would move ahead with the protective order and prepare a public statement, not defensive, not reactive, but measured. The voice of a woman who'd spent her life building something that someone younger thought they could steal. Second, to a private investigator named Meredith Sloan. She'd worked with James once, years ago, to vet a potential partner with shady offshore dealings. She was discreet, brilliant, and most importantly, had no online presence. I gave her Celia's burner phone, the printouts, the USBs, and told her, find what she's hiding. And third, to Carmen McBride. Carmen was an anchor at a local television station, We'd served on the same community board for veterans housing back in the 90s, back when I was still learning how to navigate rooms filled with men who smiled too wide and listened too little. Carmen owed me a favor. "I'm not asking you to air anything yet," I said. "Just come to the house, watch, listen, and tell me what you believe." There was a pause on the other end. "Then, I'll be there at 6. While I waited, Rosa and I worked like soldiers in a war room. She organized the physical documents, labeled timelines, traced transactions from Celia's credit cards, several of which had small, repeated payments to an account under the name M. Rains. We didn't know who that was yet, but Meredith would. I, meanwhile, wrote. It had been a long time since I sat at a desk with pen and paper and no filters. But now, the words came fast. Not legalese, not speeches. Truth, my version of events, my memories, my mistakes, my fear. I wrote about the milk, the strike, the fall. The moment I realized my son's wife saw me as nothing more than a dying inconvenience. It wasn't for publication. It was for the record. At 5:50 del pomeriggio, Carmen arrived. She was older now, like me, but still sharp as a tack, with eyes that missed nothing and a voice that could cut glass or calm a room, depending on her mood. I welcomed her into the study, offered her tea. She declined. "Tell me," she said simply. I handed her the folder Marcus had prepared. Documents, screenshots, medical reports, and the uncut security footage. I didn't speak as she read and watched. For 40 minutes, the room was silent, except for the occasional sigh or scribble of her pen. When she finished, she looked up. "My God," she said. I nodded. "She thinks I won't fight back." Carmen's brow furrowed. "Why now? Why all at once?" "Because I've made the mistake of being quiet for too long." She leaned forward. "You want to go on record?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to show the world. I want them to see who she really is." Carmen tapped her pen on the folder. "You'll need more than this. She's already painted herself as the victim." "I know." I opened my laptop and showed her the unedited audio. Celia's voice in the kitchen, whispering about how no one questions a woman her age. When it ended, Carmen said, "That's your hook." "She called me paranoid," I said, accused me of abusing her, painted Rosa as the help-turned-henchwoman. "She weaponized every stereotype in the book," Carmen agreed. "So we turned the book back on her." We talked for 2 more hours. By the end of the night, we had a plan. Carmen would produce a special report quietly. It would feature my voice, not my face, at first. Anonymous sources, medical evidence. A layered presentation, not a hit piece, but a reckoning. In the meantime, Meredith sent an encrypted file. Inside, gold. Bank statements linked M. Rains to a man named Miles Rains, a former tech consultant Celia had briefly worked with during Darren's foundation launch. Meredith dug deeper. Turns out Miles had been arrested in California 6 years ago for identity fraud and medical forgery. The charge had been expunged, but the connection mattered. And the payments? Traced back to a clinic that supplied organic supplements, some of which matched the toxins found in Darren's blood. We had her, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired of the games, tired of pretending everything could be restored to what it once was. Because even if she was exposed, even if the world saw the truth, Darren still had to live with the echo of what she'd done. And so did I. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, looking at the photo on my dresser. James in his army blues, grinning like the world was still simple. I touched the frame lightly. "I miss your clarity," I whispered. "I miss how things used to make sense." The door opened softly. Darren. He looked pale, older. The weight had settled in his shoulders. "Mom," he said, "I saw the report. The bank stuff. The guy, Rains." He didn't finish. Instead, he sat beside me. "I keep wondering," he said quietly, "was any of it ever real? You mean your marriage?" He nodded. "I think parts of it were," I said. Enough for her to convince herself she was justified when the rest stopped being real. He looked at me. "I want to testify," he said. That surprised me. "Are you sure?" "I need to say it out loud. I need people to hear it from me. That I saw the signs, that I ignored them, that I almost let her kill you." I reached for his hand. "You don't owe the world your shame," I said. "I'm not doing it for the world," he said. "I'm doing it for me, For you. For Rosa. And in that moment, I saw something shift in him, not just regret, but resolve. The next morning, Carmen returned with a cameraman. She placed the mic gently on my lapel and said, "Are you ready?" I looked straight into the lens. My voice didn't shake. "Yes," I said. "Let's begin." The segment aired on a Thursday night, just after the 6 o'clock news. Carmen had done what she promised, edited it with grace and grit, a delicate blend of facts and emotion. My face remained hidden, my name anonymized, but my voice carried through every frame like a quiet storm. Her title was simple: The Widow's Milk, a story of trust, betrayal, and survival. Rosa's testimony came midway through. Her voice trembled at first but steadied as she recounted the morning of the near poisoning, the way Celia pushed her, the way I fell, the way the milk splashed across the marble like something sacred being defiled. Carmen layered the footage from the hallway camera, the pharmacy receipts, the toxicology report. The final segment cut to Darren, no longer anonymous, no disguise. He sat in full view, the camera close, his eyes tired but clear. "My name is Darren Johnson. I'm the son of the woman in this story." And I believe her. Just 6 words, but they sent shockwaves. By Friday morning, the internet was on fire. Local media picked it up. National outlets followed. The public was split, some calling Celia a sociopathic gold digger, others accusing me of orchestrating a character assassination. A few claimed it was all some inheritance dispute dressed up as drama. But the footage didn't lie. The medical records didn't lie. And neither did Rosa's bruises or my broken wrist. We weren't fighting for sympathy. We were presenting facts. And still, I knew better than to expect an easy reckoning. Celia responded that same evening, posting a professionally filmed video in front of a fireplace, wrapped in a soft gray sweater. A Labrador rested at her feet. Her eyes were glassy, her tone one of gentle disbelief. "I'm heartbroken," she said. "Not just by the accusations, but by the people making them. I've never hurt anyone. I've only ever tried to love and protect my family." She dabbed a tear. "I don't know what happened to Elaine, but I know the woman who raised Darren would never have let this happen. I miss her. It was masterful." By Saturday, hashtags appeared. Justice for Celia. Milkgate. Believe her too. The noise was deafening. I stopped reading the comments. So did Rosa. But Darren couldn't look away. "She's got lawyers now," he told me that afternoon. "Real ones. Expensive ones." I expected that. "She's threatening defamation suits. She'll lose, but it'll get messy." I nodded. Truth always is. That night, I received a call from Meredith. "I have something," she said. "Something big." I met her at a diner off Route 52. She slid a folder across the booth with the confidence of someone who'd just uncovered the final piece of a puzzle. "She paid someone," Meredith said. "Not Rains, someone else. A pharmacy technician in Charlotte. 2 payments, one before the milk incident, one after." "What for?" "For a compound that mimics a natural supplement but, in high enough doses, becomes dangerous, undetectable in small quantities. But together with what was found in Darren's blood, it completes the picture." I stared at the invoice inside the folder. It wasn't just damning, it was irrefutable. "She planned this months in advance," I whispered. Meredith nodded. "With clinical precision." As I left the diner, I realized something else. Celia didn't just want me gone. She wanted ownership of my legacy, my company, my son, my house, everything I built. She thought I wouldn't fight back. And maybe, a year ago, I wouldn't have. But now, I was not the woman she mistook for weakness. That Sunday morning, I went to church for the first time in months, not to pray for vengeance, but to sit quietly in the second pew from the front, the one James always chose because it was close enough to the Lord but far enough from the gossip. The organ played softly. A few people looked my way. Whispers stirred, but I didn't flinch. Celia could have headlines. I had faith. Not blind faith, earned faith. Faith in truth. Faith in Rosa, who sat beside me with her head bowed, trembling slightly, but who refused to stay home, even when threats began to show up in her inbox. Faith in Darren, who stood tall as the board prepared for an emergency meeting not to oust me, as Celia had hoped, but to protect the company from the fallout she caused. And faith in justice, which sometimes moves slow, but never forgets. After the service, a woman approached me. Older, kind eyes, soft voice. "I watched the segment," she said. "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding us that our voices don't fade with age." I blinked back something sharp. That afternoon, I met Carmen in the studio. We filmed a follow-up. This time, I let them show my face. "My name is Elaine Johnson," I said to the camera. "I am not a victim. I am a survivor. I'm not speaking to ruin someone. I'm speaking because silence nearly ruined me." Carmen nodded behind the camera, her eyes glassy. "This isn't just my story," I continued. "It's the story of every woman who's been dismissed, who's been called paranoid, emotional, dramatic. We are none of those things." A pause. "We are watching." The segment aired the next day. This time, the comments were different. "Why does she remind me of my mother? My grandmother was poisoned by her caregiver. No one believed her either. She looks like someone who's telling the truth." Sometimes, you don't need to convince the world. You just need to make them remember. It came, as I knew it would. A summons. Thick envelope, heavy stock. Delivered to my door in person by a pale young man in an ill-fitting blazer who couldn't meet my eyes. Celia Reinhart versus Elaine Johnson. Cause: defamation, emotional distress, financial damage. I held the paper in my hand, let its weight settle into my palm like a stone I'd been carrying anyway. Rosa hovered nearby, folding a napkin in tight, trembling motions. "She's suing you?" she whispered. I didn't look up. "No, she's making noise." But even as I said it, I felt the familiar cold slide into my chest, the legal machinery revving up, and I knew what this was. It wasn't about winning. It was about exhausting me, dragging me into depositions, smearing my name in the press, driving up my legal bills, making me out to be a bitter, vengeful widow throwing stones from a crumbling house. I called Marcus immediately. "She filed in New Hanover County," he said, scanning the document. "Her attorneys are betting the jury pool there will be younger, more sympathetic." "To her?" "To the image she's crafted." He rubbed his chin, eyes flicking over the text. "This isn't just a nuisance suit, Elaine. It's a play for narrative." I leaned back in my chair, fingers folded tight. "Then let's give them a different story." The days that followed were surgical. I prepared for the board hearing at the foundation where Darren had served as interim CEO since James passed. The meeting had been postponed due to the scandal, but now it was rescheduled. Celia had once dreamed of controlling this room. Now, she would face its judgment. I spent hours with Marcus crafting our presentation, not defensive, not reactive, but firm, clear, about protection, about integrity, about legacy. Darren, to his credit, stood by my side. He was quieter now, more measured. His grief had aged into something sharper, more sober. Sometimes I saw him staring off into nothing, like he was trying to trace the exact moment his life had forked toward disaster. At other times, I saw the boy who used to defend playground strangers from bullies. That boy was still in him. I just had to remind him how to fight again. 3 nights before the hearing, I got a call from Meredith. "I have something you're going to want to see," she said. She emailed me a video file. Grainy surveillance footage, a small office, 2 people, Celia and Miles Raines. They were mid-conversation, her body language tense, his face twitchy. "She drinks it every night," Celia was saying, leaning forward. "It won't show up, not in normal doses, and the kid's so dumb he won't question it." My breath caught. "This isn't just footage," Meredith said. "This is a nail in the coffin." "Where was it taken?" "A clinic in Charlotte." Raines didn't scrub the cameras. Sloppy. I sent it to Marcus. He called within minutes. "This changes everything," he said. "We countersue, malicious intent, attempted manslaughter, financial fraud. And the foundation? We walk in with this, and we walk out with full control." The board meeting was held in the main hall of the Johnson Foundation, under the massive portrait of James that hung above the fireplace. He looked down on us, warm-eyed, as if blessing the storm about to unfold. The room buzzed, nervous, cautious. Celia arrived late. She entered in cream and gold, a vision of grace and martyrdom. She took her seat with the composure of someone who still believed she could outwit the storm if she just smiled hard enough. But her eyes flicked to Darren, then to me. And she knew. I stood first. Told them everything. Not the story the press wanted. The real one. I told them about the milk. The cameras, the threats, the bribes, the footage, the pharmacy. I gave them receipts, timestamps, names. Marcus projected the video of her and Rains on the screen. The boardroom went silent. Then Rosa stood. She spoke slowly. Her voice broke twice, but she told the story only she could tell, the slap, the fall, the plea. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Truth stood tall enough on its own. Celia's chair creaked as she stood. "This is a circus," she hissed. "You're letting them humiliate me with doctored videos and a maid's fantasy." Darren rose next. He didn't speak to her. He turned to the board. "I watched my mother almost die. I drank the same milk. I lost everything I believed in, and I let this woman," he gestured to Celia, "convince me that power was more important than people." A pause. Not anymore. It was done. The board voted unanimously to remove Celia from any beneficiary access, reinstate my leadership with full oversight, and open an internal ethics investigation. As Celia stormed out, cameras waited. This time, they didn't follow her. They followed me. Back home, I didn't celebrate. Rosa made soup. Darren sat by the window, quiet, tracing the edge of his mug. "I don't think I'll ever be the same," he said softly. "You won't," I replied. "None of us will. But I'll be better," he added. "Eventually." "Yes," I said. "You will." And as I washed the dishes, I thought about justice. How it doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it takes the form of a returned photograph, a quiet apology, a reclaimed voice. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing tall in her own house, unshaken. 3 days after the board meeting, I received an envelope in the mail. Not from the courts, not from Celia's lawyers, from James. Well, not really. The return address was our lawyer's office in Wilmington, but the name scrawled on the label was his. My husband, my partner, the man who'd been dead for nearly 30 years. I sat down slowly, knife in hand, heart strangely still. Inside, a sealed letter, dated March 1997, handwritten, the paper yellowed with time. "Elaine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry to leave this burden on you, but I know you're strong, stronger than I ever was. I've set aside a file with Charles, our estate lawyer, with specific instructions. You'll know when it's time. You always did. Protect Darren. Protect the company. But most of all, protect your name." I stared at the ink, stunned. I called Charles immediately. He sounded shaken too. "I've had that letter in my vault for nearly 3 decades, he said. "Your husband instructed me to give it to you only if I saw any signs that someone was trying to dismantle what you built together." "There's a file?" I asked. "Yes. Sealed. Confidential. Do you want it delivered?" "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'll come get it." The next morning, I drove to Wilmington myself, 2 hours along a quiet coastal highway, early sun lighting up the pines like golden knives. I hadn't been there in years. It felt like driving back through memory. Charles greeted me in the lobby, older now, balding, but his eyes still sharp. In his office, he pulled out a small black case and unlocked it with 2 keys. Inside, a folder. James's handwriting on the cover. Contingency. If the house is ever threatened. I opened it and read, and everything changed. Inside were signed documents, proof that James had amended our prenuptial agreement before Darren was even born. An ironclad clause that any spouse of our child must undergo independent vetting before receiving access to family assets, company shares, or property deeds. The clause had been buried, never activated, but it was legally binding, and it had never been waived, which meant that Celia's entire claim, her trust fund, her real estate titles, even her vehicle was null. She'd married Darren under false pretenses, but more than that, she was never legally entitled to a dime. My hands trembled as I held the documents. James. He had foreseen something like this. Not her, specifically, but the potential, the threat. He knew the empire we built could draw bloodsuckers, and he trusted me to be the one to face them. I left Charles's office with a copy of everything. Had it notarized. Delivered to Marcus the moment I got back. His eyes widened as he read. This buries her, he said. Not just the defamation suit. She could be investigated for fraud, perjury, asset theft. Can we act on it immediately? We can file a motion for emergency injunction on all remaining assets under her name. She's going to scream, but we're not freezing her money, we're freezing ours. And what about the condo? I asked. Technically yours, he replied. She's trespassing. I nodded once. Then let's reclaim it. The next afternoon, sheriff deputies served Celia the notice. She was caught completely off guard, stepping out of a nail salon in gold heels and oversized sunglasses, camera-ready and smug, until she saw the papers. She called Darren from a blocked number that night. He didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "I hope you're proud of yourself," she spat. "You let that woman ruin me, after everything I gave up for you. After all the years I spent pretending to fit into your pathetic little family. You think you're a man now, hiding behind your mommy?" She hung up without saying goodbye. He played the message for me in the living room. I said nothing, just pressed save. "Should we give it to Carmen?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "Let her burn a little longer in silence." A week later, I stood inside the condo she once called her palace. It was a sterile space, pristine, over-decorated. It didn't feel lived in. It felt staged, like her whole life. We changed the locks. Rosa came with me, quietly removing a few things Celia had left behind. A broken perfume bottle, a white silk robe, a drawer full of hotel mini shampoos, each labeled with dates, places, proof she'd been traveling secretly long before the scandal. As I stared at the empty walls, I felt something odd. Not triumph, not even relief. Just quiet, like a final door had closed. "This was never her home," Rosa said behind me. I turned. "No," I agreed. "It was never her anything." Back at the estate, Darren and I had dinner together in the sunroom, something we hadn't done in months. He asked about the future, about the foundation, about Rosa. "She's staying," I said simply. "Her name's going on the new charter." He smiled at that. "And you?" he asked. "What about me? What's your next chapter?" I looked out the window. The magnolia tree James planted when Darren was born had started blooming again late, but fierce. "I think I might finally live a little," I said. "For myself." He raised his glass. "Two beginnings." We clinked glasses. And somewhere in the distance, I felt the weight of Celia fading, not gone, not erased, but powerless now, unarmed. Because she tried every door. But this one never opened for liars. The thing about silence is, it starts out as protection. Then, over the years, it becomes something else. A routine, a ritual, a habit so deeply woven into your bones that you forget what your real voice ever sounded like. The Celia chapter was closing. She was out of our house, out of the foundation. Her lawsuit had collapsed under the weight of her lies, and her name was rapidly becoming one you whispered about in cautionary tales. But even as peace settled over my household, I found myself waking at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, asking one question: when did I first start going quiet? I think it was the day James died. He was 49, fit, sharp, running at full speed until his heart betrayed him over breakfast. 1 second he was laughing at the comics section. The next, he was slumped over the table, the orange juice dripping from his hand. It wasn't just grief that silenced me. It was what came after. The world suddenly expected less from me. "Take time off," they said. "You don't need to run the company." They called it being considerate. I called it erasure. But I smiled, nodded, stepped into the vacuum and worked twice as hard to prove I hadn't died with my husband. I never stopped, until Celia knocked the glass from my hand and made me see that I was living in a fortress of my own making. Stone walls, yes, but no windows. That Sunday, with the house quiet and Rosa off visiting her granddaughter, I decided to take a walk through memory. I opened the door to the attic. I hadn't been up there in years. The air was thick with dust, but the boxes were neatly labeled, just the way I'd left them. Darren, elementary. James, military. Elaine, personal. And one in the back I hadn't touched since '97. It was labeled legacy. Inside, old ledgers. Clippings from early company days, handwritten notes from clients, and a faded envelope in James's handwriting again. It said only, "For when you forget who you are." I didn't open it yet. Instead, I pulled out a yellowed manila folder titled Women's Grant Initiative, 1984. I had forgotten about this. It was the first real thing I did with my own name on it, a program to support single mothers who wanted to start small businesses. We funded 23 women in our first year: hairdressers, caterers, seamstresses. By 1990, we had supported more than 200. Why did I stop? The answer came too fast. Because I was tired. Because James got sick. Because Darren needed more from me. Because the company was always louder than my passions. Because life took over. And because I let it. I sat there on the attic floor for hours, surrounded by pieces of a woman I used to be, a woman I liked, a woman who spoke without apology and acted without waiting for permission. I opened James's letter last. Elaine, if you're reading this, you've forgotten how to be soft. You were always fierce. You carried us. You carry others. But don't forget, being soft isn't weakness. It's grace. It's the thing that made me fall in love with you. Don't armor yourself so hard that nobody can reach you. Don't wait until the end to speak your truth. The world doesn't need another empire. It needs you. It was signed in that rushed, uneven signature he used when he wrote fast when he was writing from his heart. I cried then. Not the stifled tears I was used to. Not the proud, polite weeping of women who have too much to do to fall apart. I wept. For James. For all the years I spent carrying other people's dreams. For the silence I wore like a badge of honor. And for the truth I should have spoken sooner. That night, I asked Darren to dinner. Just the two of us. We ate on the back porch, under the stars, like we used to when he was a boy, and the world was simpler. There's something I want to do, I told him. He looked up. What is it? I want to revive the Women's Grant Initiative, fund it, run it, with Rosa. His smile was slow but wide. You sure? I nodded. It's time I stopped reacting to threats and started building again, but this time for me, for women like me. He raised his glass of sweet tea. To beginnings. I looked at him for a long moment. To truth, spoken loud. Because silence may protect you, but only truth will set you free. Rosa hummed when she cooked. It was always the same song, low, almost mournful but steady, like her. That morning, I found her in the kitchen, hands deep in masa, preparing homemade tamales for the staff at the community center. Her sleeves were rolled up, and the sun coming through the window made her silver hair shine like threadbare silk. Do you ever stop working? I teased gently. She looked up and smiled, flour dusting her cheek. Do you? We laughed. Since reviving the Women's Grant Initiative, Rosa had become more than my right hand. She was my partner. We registered the program as a nonprofit under the foundation's umbrella. Carmen agreed to do a small media piece once we launched officially. And Darren offered seed funding, his own money, not the foundation's. He said it was his way of restoring what he had nearly let Celia destroy. Our new mission was simple: fund and mentor women over 40 who had once set aside their dreams for children, husbands, caretaking, and now wanted to reclaim them. We called it Second Light. Because not every dream has to be first, Rosa said. Sometimes the ones that come later shine brighter. That morning, I had 2 applications to review before our board meeting. I sipped my coffee while Rosa plated the last of the tamales. And then the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Rosa wiped her hands, motioned for me to sit, and went to answer it. A few seconds passed. Then I heard her voice, sharp, uncertain. Francisco? I stood up, heart catching at the tone. In the doorway stood a tall man in his late 60s, gray at the temples, handsome in the way that age grants a man shaped by time, not ego. Hello, Rosa, he said quietly. His accent was soft, buried beneath years of English, but still there. Still home. She stared, speechless. I stepped closer. Rosa, is everything all right? She turned to me, eyes wide, and whispered, It's my husband. She hadn't spoken of him in years. I'd always assumed he had passed, or perhaps left long ago. She only ever mentioned him once, in passing, when we were organizing the pantry during Celia's trial. Some men leave before they pack, she'd said. He was gone long before the door closed. Now, Francisco stood in my foyer, hat in hand, voice trembling. I saw her name in the news. In your segment. I didn't know if she was okay. I needed to see her. Rosa remained frozen. You left 20 years ago. I did. No word, no letter, nothing. I know, he said. I was a coward. and I've regretted it every day. The silence between them was thick, alive. I glanced at Rosa. Would you like me to give you both some space? But Rosa didn't take her eyes off him. No, stay. So I did. He explained how after leaving he'd worked in Texas, then Arizona, saving money but never enough courage to come home. He'd seen her face during the recent coverage, heard her voice. You spoke like someone who remembered who she was, he said, and I remembered who I used to be, before I failed you. Rosa didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply sat down and said, I don't need you to fix anything. I've already done that. But I'm not the woman you left. I'm more. I know, he said. I just hoped, maybe, I could see who you became. She looked at me, then back at him. I help women now, women like me, and I don't have room for ghosts. He bowed his head. Then I'll leave. She paused. But first, she said, voice steady, you can have tamales, because I was raised to feed even the ones who break you. So we ate, in silence, at first. Then with small, cautious laughter. Francisco didn't ask for forgiveness. Rosa didn't offer it. But something softened in her eyes as he left. Later, I asked her if she wanted to see him again. She shook her head. No. But I wanted him to see me, the real me. She paused, then added, for so long, I thought I was invisible. To my husband, to the world, even to myself. But now I know, being seen isn't something someone gives you. It's something you choose. I reached for her hand. That's exactly what we're giving these women. Not a handout, a mirror. She nodded. And the next day, we opened applications to the public. Within a week, we had over 300 submissions. Women who had once been wives, nurses, teachers, caretakers, survivors. They wrote about starting bakeries, wellness retreats, mobile dog grooming businesses, handmade quilts with stories sewn in every corner, dreams long delayed but not denied. And as Rosa and I sat reviewing them late into the night, I realized that Celia had tried to poison my body, but it was my silence she had counted on most. And now, that silence was gone. It began with an envelope, no return address, no handwriting, just a printed label that read, to the Board of Second Light. Rosa brought it in from the mailbox one Thursday morning, sandwiched between donation receipts and vendor invoices. At first, I thought it was another grant application, late but hopeful. But when I opened it, my stomach tightened. Inside was a single-page typed letter. It was polite, elegant even, and cruel. To whom it may concern, I write not out of malice, but concern. As a woman who has long advocated for integrity and equity, I feel compelled to share what I have learned. The organization known as Second Light, while noble in appearance, is led by a woman who has recently been the center of great scandal. Miss Elaine Johnson has been accused, not acquitted, of defamation, manipulation, and coercive behavior toward her daughter-in-law. While she may paint herself as a survivor, the courts have yet to issue any ruling in her favor. I do not presume guilt. But surely, with so many deserving nonprofits out there, it would be wise to examine the origins of Second Light and question whether its leadership reflects the values it claims to uphold. Respectfully, a concerned woman. I read it 3 times. Each time, the message got louder. You may have survived, but we will not forget. I passed the letter to Rosa without a word. She read it once, jaw tight. Then again, lips pressed to a line. She's trying to kill it before it even begins, Rosa said quietly. Whoever wrote this, it's Celia. Are you sure? She didn't sign it. That's how I know. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Rosa asked, what will you do? Nothing, I said. Nothing? She repeated, shocked. I nodded slowly. For now, because I had learned something over the last few months. Not every fire needs a torch. Sometimes it burns itself out when starved of oxygen, but that didn't mean I would sit idle. I called Carmen. She answered on the first ring. I need a story, I said. A real one. 2 days later, Carmen and her crew arrived at our first grant recipient's home in Durham. Marcia Bellamy, 58, retired caregiver, widow, mother of 3, and now owner of a mobile hair salon van funded by Second Light. She called it Silver Streak. I wanted to bring dignity back to women who can't get out of bed, Marcia told Carmen. "There's power in having your hair washed, in feeling seen." She showed off the van clean, bright, lined with photos of her mother and a quote painted on the door: "You don't age out of beauty." Carmen filmed her entire day. The next was Tanya Simmons, a former office manager now baking vegan pies for cancer patients, using her late sister's recipes. Then Diana Wu, 61, who finally published her first children's book, illustrated by her granddaughter. The segment aired that weekend. Second Light, women starting over, one dream at a time. It was radiant, hopeful, unapologetic, and it drowned out the whisper of that letter like gospel in a thunderstorm. But even as we celebrated, Marcus called me with a warning. "We traced the envelope," he said. "Drop box on Pine Street. Security footage shows someone in a hoodie, 5'6", white, left-handed. Doesn't match Celia's build, but could be a proxy. So she's not done." "No, she's wounded. And wounded people don't retreat," I said. "They lash out." He was quiet for a beat. Then, "You need to prepare." "For what?" "For her final play." I knew it would come. Women like Celia didn't lose gracefully. They saved ammunition. Old letters, voicemails, photos with no context but perfect timing. And sure enough, just 1 week after the Second Light segment aired, a tabloid published a headline: "Elder Empire, did Elaine Johnson pay off her son's silence?" Below it, a blurry photo of Darren walking out of a courthouse, and next to it, a screenshot of a check $10,000 dated a week after Celia's expulsion from the board. My signature at the bottom. It wasn't a bribe. It was a bridge, a gesture of healing between a mother and her son. But they didn't care. The story spread fast. Social media reignited. Radio hosts debated. Morning talk shows speculated. I called Darren. "Are you okay?" I asked. He exhaled hard. "I knew it might happen, but it still hits." "Let's get ahead of it," I said. He hesitated, then said, "Let's do it together." That night, we held a press conference. Just the two of us. No podium, no lawyers, just truth. "I gave my son money," I said into the mic. "Not for silence, but for stability. He had nothing when she left him. No access, no income, just shame." Darren stepped forward. "And I took it. Because my mother reminded me that asking for help is not weakness. It's how we rebuild." A few reporters tried to twist the moment. We didn't flinch. Because the truth wasn't a strategy. It was our foundation. Afterward, back at home, Rosa poured me a glass of wine. We sat on the porch as the cicadas hummed and the dusk wrapped around us like an old coat. "You think she's done now?" Rosa asked. I looked out at the magnolia tree. "No," I said, "but I am. Done? With letting her live in my head. I've got women to fight for, dreams to light, and she's just ash." She smiled. "Then let's build." And we did. Because when someone tries to erase your voice, the best revenge is to raise a choir. She walked into our grant orientation like she owned the room. Confident stride, sharp suit, navy, tailored, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, not a hair out of place. The kind of presence that made people pause, even if they didn't know why. Her name was Ava Knight, 43, divorced. Former marketing executive for a Fortune 500 company who'd left the corporate world after what her file called irreconcilable differences with executive leadership. When I asked her what that meant, she smiled thinly and said, "I refuse to make myself smaller." I liked her instantly. She had been approved for a grant to launch a consultancy firm specializing in helping midlife women rebrand their professional identities. Her business pitch was meticulous, her vision airtight. "You don't just need a resume," she said at the podium during the kickoff event. "You need to reclaim your narrative." The women in the room applauded, but I felt something else, a tightness behind my ribs. Not envy, not fear, recognition, because 20 years ago, I was her. Relentless, polished, impeccably composed. I knew what that armor looked like from the inside. We assigned mentors to each grant recipient, veterans in their industries, mostly, but Ava requested me directly. "Only if you have time," she said in her follow-up email. "But I think we speak the same language." I agreed. At first, our sessions were smooth, productive. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She arrived with color-coded notes and asked incisive questions. She absorbed feedback like oxygen. But the third week in, something shifted. She arrived late. No coffee. No eye contact. "I had to take a call," she muttered, setting her bag down with less grace than usual. "Family nonsense." "You want to talk about it?" she snorted. "Not particularly." I didn't push. But something lingered in the air, a kind of fraying. A week later, it snapped. We were reviewing her brand language, and I suggested softening a few phrases, making them more inclusive, less corporate. She stiffened. "So I should dilute myself?" "That's not what I said." "You mean well," she snapped. "But you built your legacy in a different time. You could afford to be soft." I didn't flinch. I built mine while they were still calling women emotional for having an opinion. I softened only after I survived. Ava exhaled sharply, as if trying to exhale herself back into control. "I'm sorry," she said quieter. I'm tired of bending, even here." And there it was, the crack behind the gloss. "I know," I said. "I do." We sat in silence for a while. Then she asked the question I wasn't expecting. "Were you ever afraid you were becoming the villain in someone else's story?" I blinked. "Every day." She nodded slowly. "Good, because I've had mentors who used their power to silence mine. I need to know you won't." "I won't," I said, "but I may challenge you. You don't need another echo. You need a mirror." She looked at me, really looked, and smiled. "For the first time in months," she said, "I don't feel alone." Over the next few weeks, Ava's business took shape. She launched a beta coaching series, signed her first 2 clients, and created a community space online that exploded with engagement. But with success came tension. At a board meeting, she interrupted Rosa, brusque, impatient. Later, Rosa pulled me aside. "I like her," she said gently, "but she reminds me of you back then." I winced. "That bad? She's brilliant, but she's scared, and scared people push, just like you did." It wasn't a rebuke. It was a mirror, and it made me realize I needed to go deeper. So one evening, I invited Ava to dinner. No laptops, no whiteboards, just a quiet meal in the sunroom with wine and roasted vegetables. Midway through, she told me about her divorce. I was married to a man who loved ambition in theory. In practice, he needed me to shrink. And when you stopped shrinking, he cheated. Then accused me of making him feel small. She laughed bitterly. He said I emasculated him by getting promoted. I shook my head. "We've been calling survival emasculation for too long." She studied me. "Did James ever feel that way?" "No," I said, "because he loved all of me, the sharp edges and the soft ones, but it took me a long time to believe I didn't have to trade one for the other." She took a sip of wine. "I think I've been Celia to people." That startled me. She saw my face and clarified. Not her cruelty, but the need to control the room. The fear that if I don't, I'll disappear. "That's not who she was," I said. "That's who she pretended to be. You, Ava, are real." Her eyes shone. And in that moment, I realized something. Second Light wasn't just about funding women. It was about freeing them from expectations, from silence, from the myth that reinvention has an expiration date. Ava hugged me before she left. "I used to think mentors were threats," she said. "Thank you for proving me wrong." "You did that yourself," I replied. I just held the mirror. The gala was nearly over when I saw her. She slipped in through the side entrance, quiet as a whisper, dressed in deep green satin that caught the light with every movement. Her hair, still platinum but now cropped shorter, framed a face freshly touched by something surgery, perhaps, or just a final attempt at reinvention. Celia. Rosa saw her first. Her hand clenched around the stem of her wine glass. "She doesn't belong here." "No," I said, "but she knows exactly what she's doing." The Second Light Autumn Gala was our first major fundraising event. Ava had just given a stirring keynote. The silent auction had raised nearly $70,000, and the ballroom at the Biltmore Inn in Asheville was glowing with success. And yet, the moment Celia entered, a tremor passed through the crowd. People noticed. They always did with women like her, glamorous, poised, and volatile like a storm dressed in pearls. She didn't make a scene. Not yet. Instead, she stood near the back wall, sipping from a flute of champagne she must have plucked from a tray, watching, calculating, waiting for her moment. I considered ignoring her. I could let her slink away, pretend her presence didn't matter. But deep down, I knew why she was here. She was trying to rewrite the ending. To make herself the haunting figure in the final act, the misunderstood villain, the wronged woman banished from the narrative. And I'd had enough of ghosts. So, I walked toward her. Slowly. Measured. When I reached her, she smiled. "Elaine, you look rested." "Celia," I said calmly, "you're not on the guest list." "Of course not. But this isn't a private family affair. It's a public event, a foundation gala. Surely you wouldn't turn away a potential donor?" I stared at her. "What do you want?" She tilted her head. "I came to show you that I'm not hiding, that your little victory didn't end me. You ended yourself." She shrugged. "That's your version. It's the version. Proven, documented, and very nearly fatal." Her lips twitched. "You've always had such flair for drama. Maybe that's why they believe you." I leaned closer. "They believe me because I told the truth, something you've never done for more than 5 minutes in your life." For a moment, her mask slipped. The softness in her eyes disappeared, replaced by something brittle, dark. Then she smiled again, tilting her glass. "I'm writing a memoir," she said. "Already sold the rights. There's interest from a streaming platform. They love a comeback story." "You mean a revenge fantasy?" She didn't deny it. "I want to make one thing clear," I said, lowering my voice. "You can spin all the tales you like, but if you slander me, my family, or any of the women in this program, you'll sue?" "No," I said, stepping even closer. "I'll bury you, with receipts." Celia's fingers curled tighter around her glass. "But if you walk away," I added, "truly walk away, I'll never speak your name again." That stopped her, because she knew deep down that my silence was the most dangerous thing I could offer. If I stopped speaking, so would everyone else. She'd vanish into footnotes. She studied me, eyes scanning for weakness. For doubt, she found none. After a long silence, she said, "We were never so different, Elaine." "No," I replied, turning from her. "That's the lie you keep telling yourself." And I walked away. Back at our table, Rosa looked at me, concerned. "She gone?" "She will be." "How can you be sure?" "Because she doesn't know how to live without the spotlight, and we just stopped looking." Carmen approached soon after. "We're over 100,000 raised," she said, smiling. "And Ava wants to introduce you for the closing remarks." I stood, adjusted my shawl, and took a breath. Let's end it on our terms. When I took the stage, I didn't mention Celia. I didn't need to. Instead, I looked out at a room filled with women who had stopped shrinking. "My name is Elaine Johnson," I said, "and for most of my life I believed that dignity meant silence, that to endure quietly was to be strong." A pause. "But silence isn't strength. It's a cage, and tonight we are unlocking it together." I spoke of second chances, of building in the ashes, of the fire that lives in women who have been dismissed, doubted, diminished. And I ended with this. We are not the footnotes of someone else's story. We are the authors, the editors, the publishers, and yes, sometimes the survivors. The room rose in applause, and behind the light, I could just make out Celia's figure slipping out the door. No fanfare, no fight. Just a woman who had finally learned what it meant to be irrelevant. It started with a dizzy spell. Just a slight wobble as I reached for the kettle. Not enough to fall, but enough to make Rosa freeze mid-sentence and lunge across the kitchen island. "Elaine," she said sharply, steadying me by the arm, "you need to sit." "I'm fine," I muttered, brushing her off with a smile I didn't mean. But I wasn't. Later that week, it happened again, this time while walking into the foundation offices. My vision narrowed, ears ringing. I gripped the wall until the world settled again. Ava noticed. "You've been skipping lunch," she said gently. "And sleep. And probably joy, too." I waved her off with a joke, but she didn't laugh. And neither did the doctor 3 days later when my test results came back. "Your heart's healthy, but your body is exhausted," she said, flipping through her clipboard. "Elaine, you're not 20 anymore. Your body is telling you something. You need to listen." I looked at her, that sharp young face, and realized how strange it felt to be the one being told to slow down, to rest, to let go. That night, I sat on the porch with Rosa. The evening air was thick with the scent of gardenia. The moonlight painted silver onto the magnolia leaves. "I'm scared," I said softly. She didn't say, "Of what?" She knew. "You're afraid that if you step away," she said, "it will all disappear." I nodded. "I've spent so long fighting first to be heard, then to be believed, and finally to be useful. I don't know who I am without the fight." She took my hand. "You're still the woman who built all this, even if you're sitting down while it grows." We sat in silence for a while. Then she added, "You've lit so many candles for others. Maybe it's time to warm your own hands." The next morning, I called a meeting. Ava, Rosa, Darren, Carmen, and the full Second Light board. They gathered around the long walnut table in our conference room, the same table where Celia once tried to seize power. Only this time, the air was different. Safe, earned. "I'm not stepping down," I said plainly, "but I am stepping back." A murmur rippled through the room. "I've given everything I had to this mission, and I'm proud of what we've built. But it's time we expand the circle of voices leading it." I looked at Ava. Effective next month, Ava will become co-executive director of Second Light. She'll oversee day-to-day operations, with Rosa and I remaining as senior advisors. Ava's eyes widened. "Elaine, are you sure?" I smiled. "Completely." "And what will you do?" Darren asked gently. "I'll teach," I said. "One-on-one mentoring, writing, storytelling. I want to help women own their stories, not just fund them." There was a beat of silence. Then Carmen stood first. She clapped. One by one, the rest followed. Not because I was leaving, but because I was staying on my own terms. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. Not drastically, not with drama, but subtly. Ava brought in new ideas, younger energy. She connected us with digital networks I never even knew existed. She streamlined some systems, modernized our outreach. But she always circled back to me. "Is this still aligned with the vision?" she asked more than once. And every time, I nodded. Because vision is a fire, but leadership is learning when to pass the torch. One afternoon, as I was leaving a writing workshop in town, I saw her, a woman in her late 60s, standing outside the bookstore, holding a weathered notebook. She had tears in her eyes. "Miss Johnson," she said, voice trembling, I was at your talk." I smiled. "Did it help?" She nodded, clutching the notebook to her chest. "I haven't written in 20 years, not since my husband passed. I thought maybe I didn't have anything left to say. And now?" She opened the notebook, revealing pages filled with tiny, slanted handwriting. "I'm writing it all down. My whole story." I felt tears rise behind my eyes. "Good," I said. "That's where the healing begins." Later that night, I sat at my desk with a blank journal. I wrote only one line. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you leave in others." The candle flickered beside me, and I let it burn. The reporter's name was Simone Hall. Sharp, ambitious, 40-something with a national byline and the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She called it a human interest piece, a feature on Second Light, and its growing influence in the world of women-led entrepreneurship. Carmen was thrilled. "This is exposure we couldn't buy," she said, practically glowing as she handed me the email. "Circulation in the millions, Elaine, front page of their Sunday magazine." But something in me tightened. Not fear, not pride, just caution, because I knew how these things worked. A journalist doesn't just want your triumphs. She wants your scars, your contradictions, your edges. Still, I agreed to the interview. I had nothing to hide. Not anymore. Simone arrived with a legal pad and an iPhone for voice memos. She asked the usual questions at first about Second Light, its mission, our most compelling success stories. But soon, the conversation veered. "I read about the Celia Stanton case," she said. "Must have been difficult. Any regrets in how you handled it?" I met her gaze. None. I protected my family and my integrity. And yet, there were rumors about power struggles, family tension. Some claimed you were overbearing. "Strong women often are," I said calmly, "until the same strength saves the people who call them that." She smiled, jotting something in her notebook. "And what about your first few years building Johnson and Wade?" she asked. "There are people who say you played tough. Some competitors called you ice and heels." I tilted my head. "Would you ask a man how many bodies he stepped over to succeed?" She looked up. "You want to write about me?" I said, voice even. "Write about the women I've funded, the lives we've changed, not about the temperature of my ambition." She blinked once, then nodded. But I knew then this profile wouldn't be the clean celebration Carmen hoped for. It would be messy. And perhaps necessary. The article dropped 2 weeks later. The cover, a stunning photograph of Rosa, Ava, and me seated on a park bench under golden autumn leaves. The headline read, "Second Light, the Revolution at Midlife." It was beautiful, mostly. The first half sang quotes from Ava about resilience, data on economic empowerment, vignettes of women launching bakeries, yoga studios, publishing houses. There were photos of laughter, tears, triumph. But halfway down page 4, it shifted. A section titled, "The Fire That Fueled Her." Simone had interviewed a former associate of mine from my corporate days, someone I hadn't spoken to in decades. He painted a picture of me as sharp-elbowed, relentless, controlling, the kind of woman who, in his words, wasn't content to rise, she had to conquer. He even claimed I once threatened to ruin his career if he didn't back a merger. It wasn't true, but it sounded true. And for the readers who didn't know me, it was enough to sow a seed. The internet lit up. Some praised the honesty. Others dissected every word, questioning whether Second Light was empowering women or building Elaine Johnson's legacy on a pile of crushed egos. I stayed quiet. For 2 days. Then I received a letter. Handwritten, cream-colored stationery. No return address. But the signature chilled me. Marjorie Daniels. My oldest friend. The woman who once co-founded the first version of what would become Second Light. The woman who disappeared from my life the year James died. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. "Elaine!" I read the profile. "You may not remember this, but once at a small cafe in Charlotte you told me that we'd change the world together. I believed you. I still do. But back then, I didn't know how much space you'd take up, how often your voice would drown out mine. I felt erased. So I left, quietly. I didn't want to fight. Now I see you've built something beautiful, something big enough to hold more than just your voice. That's growth. That's grace. And I'm writing to say, I see you now. The full you, the woman you were, and the woman you are. And I'm proud, am seen." I cried, not because I felt attacked, but because I had been seen in full and still accepted. Later that night, I read the article again, not as Elaine the founder or Elaine the survivor, but as Elaine the woman. They saw my power. They saw my flaws. They saw the whole story. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point. The next day, Ava brought me flowers. "Press cycle's wild," she said. "But I think we just became real." I nodded. "Perfection is forgettable," I said. "But truth? Truth endures." And as we walked past the portraits of our grant recipients lining the hallway, I thought, let them tell the story. Just make sure you own the ending. The auditorium was packed. Rows of women, gray-haired and bright-eyed, sat in folding chairs with name tags clipped proudly to their cardigans. Their children and grandchildren filled the seats behind them, clutching phones and cameras, ready to capture the moment. The first graduating class of Second Light, 112 women, each one a story of reclamation. There were teachers turned florists, nurses turned sculptors, grandmothers who had launched food trucks, opened bookshops, published novels. The stage was simple, draped in violet and gold, but the energy in the room could have lit a city. I sat near the front, between Rosa and Ava, clutching a small linen handkerchief embroidered with my initials, Rosa's graduation gift to me. "This is yours as much as theirs," she said, squeezing my hand. Ava leaned in. "You ready for your speech?" I nodded, though my heart was uncharacteristically unsteady. I'd spoken at boardrooms, in court, at galas, on national TV. But this was different. This was sacred. This was home. As the last name was called and the crowd erupted in applause, I rose and walked slowly to the podium. The room quieted before I even spoke. These women had waited decades to be celebrated. They would not be rushed. I looked out at them not as a founder or leader, but as one of them, a woman who had started over. "My name is Elaine Johnson," I began, "and like many of you, I once thought my best chapters had already been written. A pause. But I was wrong. I told them about silence, about survival, about how, for years, I'd learned to live in rooms where I had to smile instead of speak, shrink instead of stand tall. I built this program, I said, voice trembling, because I wanted no woman to ever feel that her story was over simply because someone else stopped listening. There were tears, nods, hands gripping hands. But Second Light is not mine, I added. It never was. It belongs to you. To every woman who decided that reinvention is not a luxury, it's a right. I stepped back from the podium to a standing ovation. And just when I thought it was over, Ava took the stage again. I know we said Elaine had the final word tonight, she said, grinning, but someone else insisted on one last surprise. I frowned, confused. From the wings, a small woman emerged, maybe late 60s, silver curls, kind eyes. She wore a bright red scarf and carried a binder filled with papers. She looked familiar, and then I remembered. Karen Price. She had been in our very first application cycle, a former seamstress turned community arts teacher, soft-spoken, thoughtful. She had nearly dropped out of the program twice, once for her health, once out of self-doubt. But she stayed, and she grew. She walked to the microphone, adjusted it nervously, and began to read. "This is not a speech," she said. "It's a letter. To someone who changed my life. Elaine, when I first heard you speak, I didn't see myself in you. You were too polished, too powerful, and I felt too invisible. But you didn't let me stay there. You looked at me the way no one had in years, not with pity, but with belief. And when I faltered, you reminded me that falling wasn't the same as failing." She looked up. "You didn't just give us grants, you gave us permission. To be loud, to be new, to be more than what we had been reduced to. So tonight, on behalf of every woman who once whispered and now roars, thank you." She stepped back, and the room erupted, not in polite claps, but in full-throated celebration. I cried openly, because for the first time, I realized this was the legacy. Not the headlines, not the money, but the ripple, the women who would go on to light others. As the night ended, Rosa and I stood near the back of the hall, watching the women dance to Aretha Franklin and Earth, Wind, and Fire, arms raised, cheeks flushed. Ava joined us, her eyes shining. "You sure you're ready to let us carry this now?" I looked at her, this fierce, brilliant woman who had once reminded me of myself and now stood wholly in her own fire. "Yes," I said, "and you won't carry it alone." She nodded. Then Rosa handed me the candle, an actual one white, unscented, in a small glass jar. "I kept this," she said, "from the day you started the first meeting in your living room. It's burned low, but it's still lit." I held it in my palm, feeling the warmth, and I knew, some lights don't fade. They pass on. They multiply. They shine in rooms we'll never enter, on faces we'll never meet. But they started somewhere, with one woman, one story, one refusal to stay silent, and that was enough. The story of Second Light teaches us that it's never too late to reclaim your voice, your power, or your purpose. No matter how deeply you've been silenced, underestimated, or cast aside, there is always a way to begin again. True legacy isn't built on perfection or applause, but on the lives you touch, the courage you inspire, and the light you help others find in themselves.